Hi everyone and welcome back to the stream. We are doing a good old music theory stream today and we are live on Twitch and YouTube. So hello to everyone on Twitch and YouTube. So if you don't know, I am Chris. I am a professional musician and during this weird coronavirus isolation time, as much as we need to keep ourselves physically fit and healthy, keep ourselves indoors away from everybody else, it's also great to be able to keep our mental health and our emotional health in tip-top condition. And I'm hoping that by connecting we have... Oh, I think my microphone's turned off. Let's try that again. So, in the stream today, we are going to be looking at some music theory. Now, this is something that some of you will know heaps about and will probably be able to twiddle thumbs through some of the things that I'm saying. However, some of you might not. Some might be joining because you'd like to learn a bit of music theory. Some might be coming just to say hello and to get a little bit of a little less isolation. A little more action, please. Only the older people will get that. So we're going to be looking at a lot of different topics today, as you can see on the stream schedule on my that way. We have the note lengths, and we'll be discussing crotchets, quavers, minims, and semi-breves. We'll go through the first of the two clefs that you try to learn within music theory, which is the treble clef and the bass clef. Then we'll also be taking a look at how to put the notes onto a stave and what they actually look like and their names. Then we'll look briefly at major and harmonic minor scales. And then there'll be a sort of 10-minute discussion at the end for you to say what would you like to have a discussion about, whether there are any parts of music theory that benefit you. So, let's get stuck in, and the first thing we're going to look at are the note lengths, and they are crotchets, quavers, minims, and semi-breves. Now, you might be thinking, what on earth do all those words mean? And we're going to tell you now. So, starting with a crotchet or a quarter note, they are written as an opaque oval shape with a stem. Now, what we're going to do now is we're going to quickly change the image, and I will show you exactly what crotchets look like. It's probably going to be... Oh, it's a bit small. There we go. So, here we have crotchets. Now, as you can see, they are ovular, and they have little stems at the edge of the oval that point downwards or upwards, depending on where on the stave they sit. And what we mean by stave are the 5 lines that you can see that the crotchets are actually attached to. Crotchets are also called quarter notes, and this is, I think, the American term, generally speaking, and therefore a lot of the international community calls these quarter notes as opposed to crotchets, and that's super cool. That's absolutely fine as well. Crotchets or quarter notes, because generally speaking, in our standard time signature, there are 4 in a bar. So they are crotchets. Now, there are other types of notes, and most of the notes that we use go in fractions, and they are divided by half each time. So if we have a quarter note, it's likely that we have a half note, we have a full note, we have a quarter note, we have an 8th note, we have a 16th note, 32nd note, and so on and so forth. So these are quarter notes, and they're sort of the first type of note length that you learn. So now let's pop on the image of a quaver. Now, a quaver is half the length of a crotchet, and they look something like this. Oh. There we go. So quavers, as you can see, have a beam across the bottom when they are together. If they're not together, they have a little tail instead that attaches to the bottom of the stem. And they are called eighth notes because in our sort of general time signature, as I said before, you would have 8 in a bar. Where you have 4 crotchets, you have 8 quavers. Now, moving on from some of the smaller notes, let's go back up and go larger in scale. And we'll move along to minims. Now, minims are called half notes as well. And they are written like the crotchet, but instead of having that ovular shape that's completely opaque, they have an ovular shape that is hollow in the middle. So they retain the stem. And minims look like this. And voila. So minims, as you can see, have the same basic shape as the crotchet. Oh, my camera's like, hello, thank you. So they have the same basic shape as a crotchet, but rather than the oval being opaque, it's now hollow. They retain the stem, and the stem will go up or down depending on where on the stave they sit, just like a crotchet. Now, minims, they are called half notes because, as we've said before, the general time signatures will contain 2. So half of a bar contains 2 minims. Now, let's quickly pop on the final note that we're going to look into today. And these notes are called semibreves. Now, these are a full note. So they're a full bar. 1 note equals a full bar in duration. So, if we find the semibreve, oh, that's very small. There we go. Make it a bit bigger. So a semibreve, as you can see, is pretty much the same again as the minim that we just saw. But rather than having a slightly small, hollow, ovular shape with a stem, it has a larger ovular shape and has no stem. So this is obviously just to differentiate between the types of notes. So if we remember our crotchets, they were ovular and they were completely filled in or opaque with their little stem. The quavers were exactly the same. They were ovular, completely opaque with a stem, but they were either joined together by a long beam or they had a little tail that was attached to the stem. Now, the minims, as we saw just a minute ago, are exactly the same as the semibreves that are still on the screen, and they are ovular, smaller like the crotchets and the quavers, and they are hollow as opposed to opaque, and they do still retain the stem. Finally, the semibreves, as is still on the screen now, are larger ovals with a hollow centre and no stem. Absolutely no stem. Now, this just serves to differentiate each type of note so that you don't just go, here's a load of notes on a page. As you read music, it almost becomes like reading a different language and also a bit of maths. So we add how many notes work within a bar. So that is your basic 4 types of notes. Now, moving on, we're going to look at 2 clefs. Now, you'll be thinking, what on earth is a clef? So the 2 types of clef that we will be looking at today are the treble clef and the bass clef. Now, the treble clef and the bass clef basically determine where the notes fit on the stave. So let's take a look for now just at the treble clef. Now, the treble clef is probably the most elaborate clef. It's nice and pretty, and it's the one that everyone tries to draw and will guaranteed go wrong the first time you try to draw it. I've tried to draw treble clefs many times, and now I can pretty much draw treble clef anywhere you like, and it's fine. But when I first started, it does this weird kind of swirly shape. Goes round and round and up and curves down and round again. And that just confused the hell out of me when I started. So this is what a treble clef looks like. Let's make him a little bit bigger. As you can see, you have to start and you have to go round and round again, and then up and then down, and then a little circle at the end. Now, obviously, being a very creative person like I am, I tried to, obviously, with a normal pen or pencil, attempted to create the sort of calligraphic pen strokes as well, and of course that always ended badly. So now I don't bother. So this is a treble clef. The treble clef, or the G clef, is possibly the most common clef, and we use it for the higher pitched instruments and voices. This includes soprano and alto voices, so the higher and lower female voices. It includes the flute, which is my instrument. It includes the clarinet, the trumpet, and other high woodwind and brass instruments, and also the piano. It's important to note that I didn't say the right hand of the piano, because although it tends to be the right hand of the piano, both hands can switch when playing the piano. We don't have to do a certain combination of fingers to make one note. As you possibly, or probably even know, piano hands can go anywhere. And it could be that you're playing all the way up one end or all the way down the other end of the piano, and therefore the treble clef might not be used if the notes are very low. So, the treble clef is called the G clef because of the starting point of the clef. If you look across to where the treble clef is, and you see where the treble clef starts before it does the curve, that portion there is on the second line of the stave, which is that set of 5 lines. Now that second line is where we place G when writing in the treble clef. So we say it's the treble clef or the G clef. So we can then quite easily tell where notes will go. This is because the notes in the English alphabet, we use A, B, C, D, E, F and G. Those 7 notes. And then once we get to note 8, what do? We go back around again. So even if the notes are going up and up and up and up and up and up and up, the note names continue to stay the same. So we go A, B, C, D, E, F, G, A, B, C, D, E, F, G, all the way up. So the G on that line makes it very easy to work out the immediate notes next to where that treble clef G is. The next clef that we'll look at is the bass clef. Now the bass clef is one of those clefs, again, that is probably the second most common to the treble clef. And it's used for all the low instruments. So let's find the picture of the bass clef. Here is our lovely little bass clef. And bass clef is used for the lower pitched instruments, hence bass clef. We think bass, we think low. So this includes the bass voice, so male bass low voices, the bassoon in its low register, tubas and other low brass instruments, cellos and double basses and other low stringed instruments, also the harp if it's going super low, and again the piano. So as we discussed with the piano, it doesn't just have high notes or low notes, and hands can cross, so we won't say left hand or right hand. In beginner piano, yes, it tends to be that the right hand plays in the treble clef and plays high, and the left hand plays in the bass clef and plays low. So where the treble clef was called the G clef because of where the swirl was, and that signified that line was the G. The bass clef is also called the F clef. Now, as we can no doubt guess, where the bass starts, it does this. It just does a big curve. So we start the curve. I'm going to have to try and draw this backwards for you, like this. Oh, that was way too big. So we do this, and we go, oh dear. It's so hard doing it on camera because everything's back to front. So we want to go like this, and we want to go around like that. And where we started, up here somewhere, is where the big circular portion that sits on the line is located on that bass clef picture. So where that line is, it's the second line from the top of the stave, those 5 lines. That is where we put F in the bass clef. So where the treble clef was a G, the F clef is an F. So again, it makes it easy to identify the notes either side. Basically where the 2 dots are, that's 1 note above F and 1 note below F. The the ovular bit on the line signifies F, and then the 2 dots that look like the colon, that would be a G and an E. A G above and an E below the F that's on that line. So that's the bass clef. So to recap, we'll quickly pop the treble clef back up. Here is our lovely treble clef. Oh, Goldie's getting big now. There we go. So here is treble clef. Treble clef is also called G clef. It's a really elaborate looking, exciting looking clef. It does have a lot of other treble clef looking counterparts, like the French violin clef, but they are not treble clefs and do not use G as the starting note. Well, they do use G as the starting note, but it's not on the same line. So we can, with any clef, move the clef up and down on the stave. And if we use a certain type of clef, let's take the treble clef for example, the G clef. If we move that clef up 1 line, so it's on the middle line of the stave, those 5 lines, if we move it up to that middle line, then the line in the middle then becomes G. And with the French violin clef, it's actually the line, the bottom line, the line at the bottom of the stave, so that would then become G. So the treble clef or the G clef can be moved up and down to change where G is, but this is the standard representation of a treble clef and is normally used, as we've said, for those high voices and those high instruments, so flutes, piccolos, oboes, clarinets, trumpets, piano, all of those instruments that can play high. Now let's quickly go back to our good friend the bass clef. Now the bass clef, as we've said, has this ovular piece as we go around, and then we have the 2 dots over here where the ovular piece was along the line. That signifies F, so bass clef or F clef. So when we use that line as a guide, that is F. And then the 2 dots that make what look like the colon create a G above and an E below. So it's easy to work out notes from that line. Generally speaking, the bass clef doesn't move from this position, but again, as with any clef, it's called the F clef, so it could move up and down, making the F line any of the 5 lines of the stave. Now, we've had a quick look at the 4 types of notes, the crotchets, the quavers, the minims, and the semibreves. That's really awkward, I can't do that. And we've also had a look at 2 clefs, the treble clef and the bass clef. Now we're going to move on to drawing notes on a stave and learning their names. So this is probably a little bit more in depth because we know that with the staves, we know that a treble clef and a bass clef have a G and an F respectively as their starting notes where the clefs are drawn. But now we're going to move away from where the starting notes are and we're going to pop notes onto a stave. So let's start with the notes on the lines to start with. So I think I'm just gonna cover my face for now because I don't think you really need to see too much of my face. So let's cover my face. There we go. That's much more exciting. I prefer that. Type in the chat if you prefer that. I definitely do. I might just put a little message in. So this basically tells you all of the notes that go from the first line to the top line on our stave. Now we remember that the stave is the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 lines that create up that musical line. Now, I've given you a nice head start here. We're using this is as if we've got the treble clef. Okay, so we're going to use the treble clef because it's the easiest clef. The first clef that most people learn is the treble clef, and it's used for the majority of instruments, or a very large number of instruments, including a lot of the voices. So the treble clef, remember, would be on the second line from the bottom and would signify G. So as we have a semibreve, remember, the ovular note without the stem, if you go to the second note along on this stave, we start with an E, then we go straight to a G. Now the G is along that second line, so we can tell that this has been written in the treble clef. And if we go G and we use the logic of the alphabet that we used before, we remember that the alphabet goes A, B, C, D, E, F, G. If we start with G, G, A. Does that work? Yes, because we've got to the end of our 7 notes. Because remember, we go A, B, C, D, E, F, G, and then repeat. So if we want to go up to the next line, we go up 1, G to A, and then A to B. So we get these notes on the lines are 2 notes apart, and also 2 letters in the alphabet apart. So easy peasy. So G going back to G, F, E. A, B, C, D, E, F, G. So G, F, E, if we go backwards. So we start with E, we go to G, and then we go, okay, G, A, B, B, C, D, D, E, F, and then we find all of those notes. If it's a little bit too confusing, or it's just too time consuming just to work out individual notes from the position of another note, a good way to remember this is a nice little rhyme that one of my teachers taught me very, 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 very long ago when I was going to say small, but I'm still small, so we'll say younger. And that is, every good boy deserves food. I like to think I was a good boy, and I got fed, so I'm going to say that that worked. Every good boy deserves food, and that gives you all of the notes on the lines. Now, if we want to have a look at the notes in the spaces, as we've already discussed, we can work it out. We can say, well, if E is here, G is here, we've done every good boy deserves food. Once we go from E to G, we think, but let's think about the alphabet. Where does the alphabet go? The alphabet doesn't go E to G. It goes E, F, G. So we can logically assume that the note in between E and G is F. So using that logic, let's find our notes in spaces. Boom! There we go. Notes in spaces. Let's cover up my face again. I'd rather not. I'd rather not you worry about seeing my face. So, here we go. We have now the word face. Now that's nice and easy to remember, isn't it? We've all got one of them. You can't really see me touching my face now because I've covered up my face, which is great. I currently don't have a face. Woo. So, face. F-A-C and E. We remember that each of the lines was every good boy deserves food. Every good boy deserves food give us the lines, and face gives us the spaces. So, we can also use the logic of the treble clef again, because we remember that on the second line of the stave, which if I can... this one here, that my finger is pointing to, this is the second line, and this is where the start of the treble clef would be. Now, if we put the treble clef there, we also remember that the treble clef is called the G clef. So any note that is on this line when the treble clef is on it is a G. And we think, okay, well, let's use the alphabet. If you go back 1 letter from G, you get F. Go back to G and go one note up, and we get A. So F and A, and then you think, okay, G, A, B, because that's how the alphabet goes. I know it's very simple, and I'm sorry if this seems simple, but it's one of those obvious things that might not be obvious to everybody. I know it certainly wasn't for me at the beginning. I was thinking, why does my teacher keep telling me to remember face? I have a face. Why do I need to worry about faces? This is one of those simple things. It's sort of a word association. So we associate the names of the notes in the spaces with the word face. And then we go up to here, which is B, because remember, every good boy. So the third line over here is B, and then one note up from B, A, B, C. We know that if we start the alphabet, we get to C straight after B. Now, let's go up one more. We remember every good boy deserves. Now, we could say, if we want to go every good boy deserves and then figure out the next note, we could just say everything. And then every good boy deserves everything. And we get E again. But rather than that, we're going to say, okay, well, we found D. And let's use the alphabet. A, B, C, D, E. The next note up is E, which is nice and easy. Ha, easy. I told you, I warned you there would be dad jokes. I warned you. So, we have every good boy deserves. Anyone in the chat going to remind me? Every good boy deserves. No one's remembered. Okay, every good boy deserves food. And then face, and they respectively relate to the notes on the lines of the stave and the notes in the spaces of the stave. So, let's have a look now at how to actually create a scale from the notes that we have now learnt. So we remember that every good boy deserves food, and I mean every good boy has a face. Then we've got both of our notes. Well, all of our notes, both of our combinations of notes. So let's now go from face to a major scale. Oh, this one is a little bit... Whoa, this one's a little bit longer than the others, so let's pop him... Almost. Nearly there. Yay, there we go. So there is our major scale. I think maybe we'll put my face back. Let's put my face back. There we go. Hello. So, underneath me, we have a major scale. We have C, D, E, F, G, A, B, C. We have all the notes from just below the stave all the way up to the penultimate space on the stave. We also have t-t-st, which I don't think makes any sense to anybody, apart from me because I'm weird. So t-t-st means tone, tone, semitone, tone, 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 semitone. Now, you might be thinking, yeah, that makes absolutely no sense to me, even when you've said the full words that those enunciations are supposed to relate to. So, let's now figure out what I mean by tone and what I mean by semitone. So, if we think to a piano keyboard, you have the white notes and the black notes, and they are all spaced next to each other. Yeah? I will actually now use my phone to get up my wonderful free piano keyboard, because I currently do not own an electric piano, which is a shame considering that we are now isolated and I cannot find one. But here is a piano keyboard, and as you can see, all of these notes, we have one note followed by a black note by a white note, followed by another black note, followed by white notes, and so on and so forth. So as we move along the keyboard, we have to go from white to a black to a white to a black to a white, then to another white, to a black to a white to a black to a white to a black to a white to another white. Yeah? So we have to move, rather than just going, you know, sliding our finger from here and going whoop, like that. Oh, I forgot I didn't turn the sound off, so we have some nice little piano sounds. So as we move up and down the piano keyboard, we have combinations of tones and semitones. So if we go back to the keyboard, the camera confuses me every single time. So if we were to say, here we have a C. So this is the first C that we have written down on below where my camera is right now on your screens. It says C. So this is C. We like C. C is very friendly. As we move up to the next white note, I don't know if it will pick it up, but I think it will. It says D. Now D here is actually 2 notes away from C, because if you look, we've got the black note in between the C and the D. Now again, as we move up to the next note, which is E, we have the same. We have another black note here that's in between the D and the E. Now this is called tone. We have a tone between the C and the D. This is almost like splitting something into a fraction. So where we also have our crotchets, our quavers, our minims and our semibreves, being quarter notes, eighth notes, half notes and full notes, we have the same here. We have tones and semitones. It's almost like having a tone and a half tone. Okay, so where we have the tone, we have 2 semitones that make 1 tone. So from C to D, we remember that we had the little black note in between. D to E, we also have that little black note. So as you see on the diagram below, we've got C to D, D to E, and they both say T in between them, and that means there's a tone in between the 2. Now when we go from E to F, there's actually no black note in between those 2 notes. So E to F is back to a semitone, just 1 single semitone. Now when we go from F to G, we're back to a tone, because there's another semitone, another black note in between the F and the G. G to A has exactly the same. We have a G followed by another black note before we get to A. A to B has another black note or another semitone in between the A to the B, which means it's another tone between A and B. And then going from B to C, there's no black note, no extra semitone, so it's just a semitone. So we get to tone, tone, semitone, tone, 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 semitone. And that creates a major scale. Now, a major scale, you might think, yeah, but what if we start on a different note? The same rule applies. So let's go back to, I've got a nice ad for TikTok here. I don't really need TikTok, thank you, I'm all good. So ignoring the ad for TikTok, let's start here on this note, which is D. So if we were to go up 1 tone from D, we've actually seen that on the diagram below, we actually have D to E already written down. So D to E is already a tone. Now remember that we needed to go a second tone first, right? We needed tone and then tone. So D to E is a tone. E, you might think just to F, and then you think, no, hang on a minute, in C major, E to F was just a semitone, but we need another tone. So this is where we introduce the first of the black notes. So we've gone from D to E, E to F sharp, which is up here. And then we needed a semitone, didn't we? We went C to D and D to E, and we've gone D to E, E to F sharp. Now we need to add that semitone. I keep touching the keys when I don't mean to. So rather than going all the way up to the next black note, we just go to the next white note, which is G. So it sounds like this, if I can do it backwards. Whoops. Ah. We'll ignore that. We'll pretend Chris didn't do that. I'm a terrible pianist as it is, and playing backwards is just definitely not my forte. So we've gone D to E to F sharp to G, which is D to E is a tone, E to F sharp is a tone, F sharp to G is a semitone, exactly the same as C major when we go C to D, D to E, and E to F. So as you can see, the method remains the same. All we need to do is think tone, tone, semitone, tone, 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 semitone on any note we choose. We can choose a B flat, we can choose a G sharp, we can choose a C, we can choose an A, any note that you would like to pick. Just use the same method, tone, tone, semitone, tone, 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 semitone, and you will, guaranteed without fail, create a major scale. Just gonna have a quick drink. Okay, so now that we've looked at major scales and we know that we can use this method below to create any major scale, let's now find a minor scale. Now there are two types of minor scale. There is a harmonic minor scale and a melodic minor scale. Now we're only going to concern ourselves with the harmonic minor today because the melodic minor is more confusing. In essence, a melodic minor scale goes up in exactly the same way as a major scale apart from note 3, which in the case of C, as we've already got down below, C goes to D, and then we just flatten or take one semitone away from the third note, which makes E, E flat. So we go C, D, E flat, but then we go F, G, A, B, C. That stays exactly the same. So it's a major scale with a flat third. On the way down, however, it changes. It goes to the key signature, and because we haven't looked at key signatures, we won't deal with this yet. So we're going to look at the harmonic minor, the other type of minor, and that is a minor scale that uses, like the major scale does, a method both on the way up and the way down, and you can transfer it from any set of notes to any other set of notes. So we can start with C, and we can use the same method for D, for F sharp, for B, any old note. Okay, so this is the harmonic minor scale. Voila! Isn't it beautiful? Now we've got lots of funny little symbols. So what they mean, the little B means flat. So that means you take the note that's written, so E or A, and we take one semitone away. So we go down in pitch by one semitone. And then the funny sort of squared thing with the two lines, that is a natural sign. Now that just means that if the note B, as is in this example, if note B has previously been flattened or sharpened, then the natural sign basically makes it back to its original status. So it's the quintessential B natural. I'm sorry, that was terrible. Okay, so now let's start with C minor. Now this is the harmonic minor. As we've mentioned, we'll leave the melodic for now. So we start with our C, which is going to be over there somewhere for you guys. So C, and then we use the same starting point as we did for the major scale, and we go up a tone to D. Then once we've gone to D, we then just go one semitone to E flat, and then one more tone, or two semitones, up to F, and then we go to G by another tone, and then we go to A flat by a semitone, then B, you'll notice it's 3 ST, which means 3 semitones. If you didn't understand that from the fact we've already used semitones, I'm pretty sure you got that. So this is B natural, and it's up 3 semitones from A flat, and then 1 more semitone to get to the final C. So tuster, tuster, thruster, tuster, tuster. That's even harder to do than the major one. So tu, stir, thruster, stir is how it sounds. That's not how a minor scale sounds at all, don't worry, I'm just being strange. So, tone, semitone, tone, tone, semitone, 3 semitone, semitone. That will, without fail, create you a harmonic minor scale. Now, let's see if I turn my phone right up and see if we can hear the difference. So this, let's go back to the major scale, and I will play for you a major scale. So we start with a C, and then we go up to 1 tone, another tone, and then a semitone. So you can hear the gaps between the notes are smaller and larger. The tones are large, ba, ba, and then the semitones, ba, ba, are only really small. So we hear to a tone, another tone, and then the semitone, just a small gap, and then a larger gap to the G, and then another large gap, another large gap, and then a small gap. And that is a major scale. Now, let's change back to the harmonic minor scale. Ooh, that's the wrong harmonic minor. Ooh, why have we got a major scale? I don't want a major scale, I want a minor scale. There we go. So here is the harmonic minor scale. Now that's tone, semitone, tone, tone, semitone, 3 semitone, semitone. And it sounds like this, where to start with we had a tone to a tone. Now we have a tone to a semitone. So we get that smaller gap. Ya, ba, ba, ba. So the gap between the 2 notes is squashed, is smaller, is a semitone rather than a tone. So the whole scale, tone to semitone to tone to tone to semitone to 3 semitone to semitone, sounds like this. Is a tone, is a semitone, is a tone, is a tone, is a semitone, and that one is the one that gives the scale away. That's the 3 semitones. So the tone, the semitone, the 3 semitone, and then the final semitone. So we have this. And that is the harmonic minor scale. And as with the major scale that we looked at before, this method of tone, semitone, tone, tone, semitone, 3 semitone, semitone can be applied to any set of notes. So we started on this note. Now let's pick a random note. Let's do an E flat. One, let's do an E flat. So we started here. Now we're going to start here. So we started with a tone. So E flat to F is a tone. Then we want a semitone. Then we want another tone. And then another tone. And then a semitone. And then the 3 semitones. And then the final semitone. So even though we started on a different note, we get the same sound as this one. So we've used one method to create every major scale, and another method that's very similar to create every single harmonic minor scale that it's possible to create. We can obviously look at melodic minor scales later on, but they change, they're different on the way up as opposed to the way down. So we want to use these two to start with because they're easy methods, and this is music theory basics. We don't want to be going so far. In fact, this is still quite advanced stuff for very, very early beginners. These scales are not touched on until later on. Some of the major scales are touched on later on in sort of grade 1 theory. Some in grade 2. Minor scales are introduced later on as well. But the actual method for creating them isn't used. It's more of a learn the individual scales kind of method. And both methods have obviously their merits. But generally speaking, I use this method if I ever get confused. Thankfully, having played scales for years and years and years, if someone says to me, play this scale, I can pretty much play that scale. But if I'm confused, or like if I'm using the piano, the piano on my phone, I'm not a pianist, and also it's not exactly piano fingery easily. So I will use this method if I need to. But generally speaking, I don't have to think. I just know that C harmonic minor sounds like this. And I know that's how it sounds. I don't need to use the method, although it's sort of in the back of my mind all the time. I can do the same with, say, let's go with E minor. I don't have to look at what's on the screen. I can just play, and it gives me the E minor. Now, this isn't to suggest that the method is useless at all. I haven't taught you a useless method. It just means that that method gets ingrained, and then once you've learned that method over and over and over again, and you've done all those scales, you no longer need to physically think about it. So we've now covered the individual note lengths, so crotchets, quavers, minims, and semibreves. We've started the first two clefs, the treble clef and the bass clef. We've also had a look at how to actually write the notes on the stave and some methods to remember those notes. Remember, every good boy deserves food, and face one of these. And after we did the drawing the notes on the stave and the learning the note names, we moved on to major scales and minor scales and the method to consistently writing them, never being able to forget them. So even if you're not using what we call a key signature, you can write every single note perfectly with these methods. Now, just before we go, it's 10 to 3, so I'm going to open this up to chat to just give me any ideas as to what they would like to see next. If they have any questions on anything that we've done so far, please do pop it in the chat. I'm going to write in the chat now that I'm opening up to questions. There we go. So please do, if you're fancying asking me a question, do let me know and I will answer as best I can. This is that awkward part in every stream that the caster really dreads, because guaranteed no one in chat's going to want to say anything. They don't want to be the first to put something in the chat. So please don't be afraid. I'm not going to bite your head off. And if you're the first person to put something in chat, I don't imagine anyone will say anything bad against you, because you're the bravest person, you're the first person to actually put something in chat. So please do, if you've got any music theory questions, or any personal questions, anything about my music, about music theory, about life in general, about how we're staying safe and isolated and not insane during coronavirus, just pop something in the chat and I will do my best to answer. I'm just going to wibble my head around a little bit to see if people would like to say something. I mean, if no one has any questions at all for me, then it's probably this is my final chance to get some questions in. So I'll give you another sort of minute or so. That will take us up to just before 5 to 3, and then we'll wrap up. So please, if anyone has any questions, do let me know, and yes, we will have a look. I mean, there are definitely a few of you watching. I can see. So hopefully some of you will ask me some questions. I don't want to ask myself questions. I know the answers. So any questions will be greatly appreciated. Just this is for my sanity as well as yours. So please do let me know if you have some questions in the next minute or so. I will just sit here and drink some squash. So thank you, Liam. We have a tip question. Do we have any tips for reading treble clef and bass clef at the same time? So that is genuinely one of the most difficult things to do. I also have trouble sometimes reading those two. Thankfully, I don't have to do it all that often because I am just a flute player. My first tip to you would be to space out any chords that you have in a fashion that means you only have to read maybe one or two of the notes on each stave. So for example, if you have a C major chord, you know you have C, an E and a G, and you want to put, say, the C, maybe an octave actually would be quite good to read it in the bass clef. So you have a lower C and then a C an octave above it. And then in the treble clef, you have maybe a G and an E right on top of each other, as if you were reading a piano chord. So pop them like that. That means you don't have as many notes to use to read at the same time. And you also know that both the notes in the bass clef are Cs. So do that with octaves, and then use the right hand to just go up in sort of small clusters of notes. That's one way, and just obviously do it very slowly. My practice ethos for everybody is just play everything slowly. If you can play it slowly, you can play it fast. It just takes time. Tip number 2 would definitely be to look at something like choral music. It doesn't have to be anything crazy like Bach's B minor Mass with ridiculous huge choral parts with soloists and orchestras. Don't worry about that. Just like a 4-part choir singing like a church hymn, something like that, because they tend to move what we call homophonically, which means they use the same or should I say homorhythmically, so they move with the same rhythm. Each part has the rhythm replicated in every other part. So then you can literally use that as okay, let's analyze the chord. Let's say the top soprano has an F and the alto has a C, and then the tenor part has a C, so it has an A, and the bass has an F. Then we work out which notes they are, and we realise that we have an F, an A, and a C, which makes an F major chord. and then we work out how to space that on the piano. So it's all about breaking it's almost the sum of the parts. So we have this great big chord, this cluster that's like, oh god, here are hundreds of notes, now try and read treble clef and bass clef at the same time. Obviously that's really difficult, so it's much nicer just to break it down into the sum of its parts. So you say, well, here are the 2 notes in the treble, here are the 2 notes in the bass, and once you've simplified that down, practice it slowly and it will eventually come. I was never the best at fluently reading and being able to play, but my physical score reading, if you ask me to, read the cello part of an orchestral piece followed by the flute part going from bass clef to treble clef, is not going to be an issue. This is because I've just spent a lot of time. And as we said actually earlier on in the video, when you have the bass clef, which is also called the F clef, and the treble clef is called the G clef, we can obviously use those F and G clef names as a basis to figure out what the rest of the notes are. So I hope that helped. Any other questions before we go? Otherwise we are going to wrap up. I think chat has been silenced. I think I obviously gave the answers that everybody needed in that one question. Let's hope. So thank you everyone for watching. We've been literally just under an hour, and I will be repeating music theory just at slightly different levels over the coming weeks. I have streams planned for Wednesdays and Saturdays at 2 p.m. GMT every week on Wednesdays and Saturdays, and I will be covering everything from intermediate and advanced music theory to sort of Flute 101, which is to do with my practice methods, how I got into flute, how I found studying at conservatoire, how I find playing with other people, tuning, all of the technical issues surrounding flute playing. And if you'd like to tune into any of them, please do just hop in. There's always Instagram, Facebook and Twitter posts just to let you guys know that it's happening. And thank you for joining the stream again, and I will see you next time. Bye for now.